Hello, everybody, and a big happy Thanksgiving to everybody in the United States. This is yet another edition of the Best of Pedalshift, and this is a special couple of weeks here because we're doing a two-parter Best of for the next couple of weeks, and this is a re-podcast of Tour Journal's Olympic Peninsula. This was featuring a real test of the Brompton, not for the first time, but I think the first substantial test of what a Brompton could do. And in fact, this episode, we feature a massive use of planes, trains, and automobiles. See, very Thanksgiving-y, to get me from DC to my first campsite on the Olympic Peninsula and on the Pacific Coast bicycling route. It also features the worst weather, I think, that I've toured in since I started podcasting. And frankly, that is all here in part one. Oh, also, I did the stats at the top of the pod, so you don't get the statistics in the very end like you normally do. You get it at the top, but you don't get me saying that, so I had to do it here in the intro. This was originally podcast March 22nd, 2018, and we will see you next week for the thrilling conclusion to Tour Journal's Olympic Peninsula. Hope you enjoy. So normally when I'm doing the first recording for the first night, it's kind of a day zero, right? Because there's not a lot of biking. But I think that this tour is a little bit different for a variety of reasons, but most importantly because it is testing the ability of the Brompton to be able to go any place and to do anything. Talked a little bit about this with Russ from The Path Less Pedaled in episode 108, or I'm sorry, 109, and I really put it to the test today, and it was by design, and I'm really excited how well it went. The funny thing was that the morning was a disaster for reasons utterly unrelated to the bike tour. It had everything to do with the Jeep that Kimberly and I have and how it was giving us problems, and it created a huge issue to get me to the airport. So we had to abandon that, and I had to go with a car share, which I was grateful that that was an option sort of at the last moment there, but it was kind of a bummer, and it really set off the day on the wrong foot, because when I leave on a bike tour, even if it's just a week, that means that a lot of stuff falls on Kimberly to do, and I know how much there is to do because when she goes away for a week, I have to handle all of the things that we have with the dogs and the house and all those other types of things. So it was frustrating that all of the things that I did to kind of leave it so that I could leave on a nice high note with no drama or anything like that, it was all for naught when I was all worried that she'd be having to deal with the flat tire and all the ramifications with that. Ended up that it turned out fine, which is good. But it wasn't a great way to leave, and that was kind of an unfortunate thing. And there were just a whole host of things that made today feel sort of cursed from about 6 a.m. until about 8 a.m., give or take. But once I was in the airport, things got okay. I've done this enough times with the Brompton that I don't stress about it anymore. And I've talked about this on the show before. Basically, you know, there are certain places where folks at airports want to tell you no because it's their job to. Lots of people bring lots of stuff onto the plane, and often too much stuff, and that means that they try to reduce the amount of stuff that people can bring on. And so when someone sees something like a folding bicycle, well, that just doesn't fit into the realm of, oh, that's allowed. So that's why I always go into stealth mode with it. And so I had some pretty good luck with that today. I kept the Brompton cover on it from the moment I left the house until the moment I was dropped off when I was first ready to ride it. And that was many, many hours later. So the cool part was that it worked like a charm. I've gotten to become really familiar with what position it needs to be in for me to be able to pick it up by the handle, what position it needs to be in if I want to roll it. And that's been something that's taken a few years to sort of get the handle on and get a hang of. And it's really important because, you know, when you're trying to move and you're trying to make connections, and I had a lot of them today, you want to do it in an efficient, speedy way. And today I felt really good about all of that. So to back it up, I was fine at the airport, got on the plane, no problem. I will say membership has its privileges. Now that I'm an MVP member, woo, was able to get on the flight early, which meant I had no problem putting it up in the overhead. I got a couple of side-eye glances, but I found being super friendly to people is a really good way to disarm and to make sure that you're not trying to hide something. If I was asked the question, which I wasn't on this trip, I've been like, oh yeah, it's a folding bicycle. I've flown with it a lot of times and it fits just fine. Didn't have to do that. Everything was totally cool. Now, I don't know if that's because maybe folks on Alaska Airlines are more apt to see these. Who knows? But I got it on, got it up in the overhead, took the celebratory picture, which hopefully many of you have seen, and then sat right down and didn't move from my seat the whole flight. And man, we moved. For going from east to west, normally it's the slower one because you're going against the jet stream. Maybe it was that nor'easter that was hitting the northeast during this time. But man, we flew. I mean, well, of course we flew, but we went really fast. And it was, I think, 40 minutes early landing, which just made everything so much easier, knowing that my connection to get to the ferry was going to be easier, that there was going to be time, all of that. And it was so early, in fact, that I was able to even have lunch with my cousin, which was a real treat because A, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get food after flying across the country like that. And B, it was nice to see him, which was really cool because he was working downtown, and it turned out it was super easy for him to come say hi to me and for us to get a teriyaki bowl nearby. And that was pretty cool. So that was great. So there I am, downtown Seattle. By the way, big ups to Seattle's Link Transit, the light rail. That is a really cheap, really efficient way to get into downtown Seattle. Highly recommended. With the Brompton, it was really easy. I think that, I'm not sure if they allow full-size bikes on it, but very, very, very efficient and much cheaper than other options to get into town. I couldn't recommend it more. In any event, I was in downtown Seattle. It was a relatively short walk. I split it up because I had, where we had lunch was about halfway to where the ferry was, so that worked out fine. I probably would have ridden it if I was pressed for time, which would have been tricky because the one thing with the transformation from flying mode into bicycle touring mode is that I had to affix the saddle to the dowel and then strap on the backpack for that. No problem. It works pretty easily, but the problem with that is that it's a zip tie system that I do. And once you do it, you either have to leave it on or you cut it off. And I tend to, once I put it on, like to keep it on. And so I'm glad I didn't have to ride. I could have with a backpack on, but it would have been really unstable, and I don't think that would have been a good idea. So it was good that it was close enough that I could roll it on its rack wheels to the ferry area. Pioneer Square in Seattle, I tell you, they love putting crap on the sidewalks. It's not like one smooth sidewalk. It's like there's bumps and ridges and everything, and it throws my wheels off all the time. It's pretty funny. Paris, the same way. I know, boo-hoo, Tim. You take your Brompton to Paris and to Seattle. Boo-hoo, I know. So in any event, got to the ferry, no problem. And on bikes, normally you go on with vehicles, but I had the Brompton, so I thought, I'm in stealth mode. Why don't I just go on in the passenger area? And although I had to carry it upstairs for that, it was no problem. Got up and in, and it just worked out really well. It was much smoother than having to deal with the boarding allocations that they normally do, having to get up and wait until cars go in or being the first or last. It's just, I found that to be a little bit of a pain. It's not that hard, but since I could be treated as a walk-on passenger, I took advantage of it, and that was really good. I was a little nervous going in because I realized it was an hour-long ferry ride, and if you listen to the show at all, you know I am a certified landlubber, and I do get motion sick real easily. But the water was, on the sound, was just crystal, what do they call it? Like a sheet of glass. It was super smooth. Beautiful day, no rain, no wind, no nothing. It was just a gorgeous day in the low 50s Fahrenheit, and nothing, no problems at all. Didn't have a single problem. Got into Bremerton even a little bit early, which was nice, so that I had time to kind of casually walk over to the bus. from this point on, all of the transit was designed to be linked together, and I had several more modes to go. So, I did a plane. Well, I did car share to get to the airport in DC. I did the plane, and then I did the light rail, and then I walked, and then I did a ferry, and next I was going to Mason County's bus system. And interestingly, they overlap, as some county systems do, into Kitsap County, which is where Bremerton is. And it was only $1.50 for that bus. And they don't charge Mason County for in the county ride. So when I transferred to the next bus, it was free. So the overall, I think I spent, I want to get this right, certainly less than $20 to get from SeaTac to where I'm sitting right now. That's pretty remarkable. Oh, and a 5-minute bike ride on top of it. I guess I buried the lead there. Yeah. So then the bus transfer point from Mason County Line 3 to Mason County Line 2, it was interesting. It was at a park. It was in one of the towns here in Mason County, and I wish I could remember what it was. Union, maybe. And it was interesting. A lot of people just sort of hanging out, and they were like younger people. Various age range, but it was definitely like full-on loitering, like, old school hang out at the 7-Eleven or at the arcade style loitering. It was kind of not a lot going on either. I was sort of fascinated by it, but I had my transfer, and I didn't stick around too much, but it was really interesting. Everybody was just sort of hanging out. I thought they were all waiting for the bus. I thought, oh, it's going to be a crowded bus. Nope, they were just all hanging out. So it was kind of interesting. The bus from that point hugs the Hood Canal, if you're familiar with the Olympic Peninsula, and basically ends up at Highway 101. And that is on the Pacific Coast route, the very famous one, the one I've done before. And I'm staying now, it was about I think if it took me 5 minutes to get here, that might be generous. North from that point, I stopped by at the gas station / convenience store and got a couple of things there, including a fine beer. Oh, I should tell you, I'm drinking Alaskan Icy Bay IPA, which is kind of a mass market beer, but I actually think it's pretty good, and I can't get it back in on the East Coast, so I actually don't mind it at all. It's pretty good, and I believe there's a surfer on there. Yes, there is a surfer on there. So by coming up here to Potlatch State Park, which I had been to before, I remember very distinctly, and if you listen to the podcast that I did on the original ride, the original Pacific Coast ride, I did not have many good things to say about this place. I think I was kind of like, eh. And it's about the same. I have to say, for $12, knowing what's ahead in Oregon for, I think they now charge $8, it's just not a great system. I think Washington State systems, I'm so happy they have hiker bikers, but it's just not a really awesome park. It's small. It's in a beautiful place. It's right next to the Skokomish Nations area there. Really interesting. There was a great burger place nearby. So, I mean, I guess it's got some amenities and stuff like that, but I don't know why my elasticity of demand must be pretty elastic, because I was just sort of like, $4 extra, don't know, 50% more. I don't think I like it as much. Maybe it's because there's pay showers too and stuff like that. It's still very early in the season, so many places are not open for camping. I'm grateful that it's open, so I guess I shouldn't complain too much. But a lot of the loops are closed, and it was kind of a pain to get some water. There are water and electric sites that are all shut down. I don't know if they're specifically turning on the water for people if they are coming here and paying for camping or not, but there is not a special water area for hiker biker here, which is really a drag. Most of the ones in Oregon, again, me being all Oregon centric, right, but in California too, yeah, the hiker bikers specifically have a water source right there, which is always really helpful. So it's kind of a bummer this one doesn't. Traffic noise, it's actually pretty trafficy. Now we're kind of on the edge of rush hour, so maybe that's why it's trafficy. So I don't have much good to say about Potlatch. I'm glad it's here because it was super, super convenient for what I just pulled off. And I'm looking over at my bike and it's all folded up, and it's just pretty dope that I was able to get on a plane, fly across country, and do a series of wacky planes, trains, and automobiles and ferries, and a short bicycle ride, and be in a tent over 3,000 miles away from where I woke up this morning. I think that's pretty cool. So it was a good day. I think that the recovery from the early part of the day is pretty good. Let's talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow looks to be a bit of a challenge. The kind of day that I expected to have, that I didn't have today, and that is, I think it's going to be wet. I think that there is an outside chance that if I wake up at a decent hour, I may be up before rain starts, and if that's the case, that would be fantastic. If I can pack up my gear dry and get it stowed, that would really be substantially better for me. Because it's going to rain on me all day, and it's going to be in the 40s, so it's going to be cold, 40s Fahrenheit, of course, and probably not the most comfortable day of riding ever. But when all is said and done, I've done this kind of a riding before. I've never done it on the Brompton, so that will be an interesting challenge. But maybe it will be easier because it's a little bit more upright. Who knows? We'll see. Got all the gear that I need. I think I've got all the warm gear that I need, the waterproof gear that I need. And we'll just make it happen. I'm going to be riding into the town of Montesano. There's not a ton of stuff between there and here, so my intention is to go back to south of here to that convenience store and kind of load up on some things to make me happy through the day. I've got a bag of nuts that I got at the airport. I think I'll get some more things like that. Maybe some other caffeinated beverages or something like that. One thing that I've decided for this trip is that I'm going to avoid sugar, unlike the trip in the fall. I found that I just my body didn't like it very much. The fact that I'm burning it, I told myself I'm burning it all, blah, 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 blah. That may be true, but at the same time, I think that it's not good for me. My body doesn't like it very much. It doesn't behave very well on it. And I looked at pictures, and Kimberly noted as well that I got a little, I don't know, bloated, inflamed maybe, and like puffy, for lack of a better word. So I'm going to try not to do that. Now, I got to find my calories elsewhere. So nuts and things like that, I think I'm going to be focused on. I'm not going to kill myself too much on grains, which I usually try to avoid. I think I'll allow myself stuff like that. So I'm breads and things like that, because sometimes it's just easier to deal with that rather than seeking out just vegetables or something like that. Although I would really like to keep eating those too. Montesano's got several restaurants that I've been eyeballing as sort of the place that I'll go to, probably soaking wet and cold, in the afternoonish hours tomorrow. Hopefully I'll have enough time to be able to go there, eat, have a good meal, and then go to Lake Sylvia State Park, which is about a mile or so outside of town. It's a little bit uphill, but I don't think it's that bad of a grade. So I'll get up there, and I'll pitch the tent and climb in. I think it's going to be raining during all that time, so not super ideal. But if I can get the tent up and I can get it up quickly enough and have a reasonably dry place, then I can get all my gear in and get underneath the canopy and go from there. It would be really nice if there was a covered area there as well. That would make things a lot easier, but if there's not, I will deal with it and it shall be fine. Got my camp towel to kind of dry out things inside the tent as necessary. I've got bandanas, all those other good things. So like I said, if the tent can go in dry tomorrow morning, if I can beat the rain, that'd be really good. So we'll see how that all goes. I'll keep an eye on dark sky to see what it's forecasting for tomorrow. It does look like there might be a spurt of rain in the middle of the night, which would kind of end up meaning it doesn't matter, because if things are a little bit wet, then, well, they're wet. But if I can get away with the things being dry, that'd be amazing. We'll see how it goes. Temperatures tonight are going to go down to about 40, which should be just fine for me. That's about when I can tend to get a little bit on the cold side, but I actually have more warm gear than I normally do. just because I knew that the possibility of it being really warm during the day, or excuse me, being very cold during the day. So I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. I think things will be all good and all right. So that's my excitement. Planning for a big day tomorrow, and planning on conquering what the Pacific Northwest can throw at me. The good news is tomorrow is going to be the worst weather day. It's one of my longer mileage days, and I think it's just going to be just fine. And I'll reward myself at the end of the day, and I'll probably sleep real good tomorrow. So until then, have a good night. I don't know. I'm going to bed. Man, what a difference a day makes. I'm in Montesano, Washington, and I am rolling towards Aberdeen, which is off route for me a little bit. Not a lot, but I have more time today. And frankly, after yesterday's ride, so yes, I am not recording this on the same day as the day one ride, and the reasons will be pretty clear in a minute. I decided to do something a little more touristy, maybe a little more on the fun side, and that is to go to Kurt Cobain Landing in Aberdeen, which I understand is pretty understated, but a spot I think I'd like to go see. And if I'm feeling really stalkery, I can swing by the home he grew up in, which is apparently around the block. Not sure if I'll do that. But yesterday, okay, so when we last left, the temperature was fine. The weather was gray but dry. Then about sometime in the middle of the night, and I'm going to estimate that it was somewhere in the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. range, pretty much all hell broke loose. The rain started, and it wasn't just kind of, whatever, kind of drizzly rain, which is frankly kind of the norm in the Northwest. It's kind of not a rainstorm, it's more like a spitting, as we used to call it. The tribes of the area have multiple different names for rain, or words for rain, I should say, in the native languages. Whatever it was for this one, it was one of the harder ones. Pardon the traffic here. I'm on Pioneer Street West, Pioneer Avenue. Pardon me. So I knew at that point that my day got tougher, which was one of the things that I was pretty prepared for, at least on paper. And so the idea then of, I'll get up as early as possible and pack up everything dry, well, that was out the window as soon as the tent started to get a little wet. And then it got a lot more wet. And by a lot more, I mean I've never been in this tent before where it had that much, it was that soaked. And that was true on all sides of the tent. Of course, you got a ground cloth, but you're still going to get water intrusion underneath. Everything was fine inside for almost all of the night. I was sort of fitfully sleeping because I didn't put my earplugs in because it was relatively quiet, but the rain was kind of noisy and it was off and on and would wake me up and would remind me of the day to come, as I would check the weather forecast and realize that it wasn't going to stop until the next day, or late that day. So the alarm went off at 6, and I said, no, if I know I'm going to be wet, I may as well wait for it to warm up a little bit, because not only was it wetter earlier, it was colder. It wasn't even getting out of the 30s for quite a while, actually. So rather than kind of subject myself to the hello hypothermia, I decided to wait it out a little bit, and I did for a couple of hours, and I even considered staying and calling it a 0 day and figuring out some other way to cobble together some stuff.
And I have to wonder if that wouldn't have been a better idea, except for one factor. And it was the thing that got me out of the tent. And that was, as I previewed before, the tent was really starting to saturate at the tarp. And there are always fail points in any tarp, no matter how good you seam seal it. It's usually around, well, seams, of course, but also around zippers and things like that for the vestibules. And what was happening was a few drops were getting through every once in a while. But you add that up over time and, you end up with water inside the tent. And I could have dealt with it for a little while, but to deal with it with a driving rain all day, I knew that the second night there would have been pretty miserable. So I thought, well, in past, when I've done riding in the wet, the riding is never as bad as it seems like when you're in the tent. In other words, the weather, frankly, it always feels like it's a more hellacious rain than it actually is. To a limited degree, that was true. And so I packed up the tent as quickly as I could. The inside had collected a fair amount of water just from those drips. Just sort of, meanders around, drops below your sleeping pad. So, I realized that it was probably the right call. And got everything packed up and started rolling. Probably around 9 o'clock. I didn't even look at the time because I figured, okay, well, it's early. I'll have plenty of time to get wherever I'm going. Also, it was cold enough that I was fairly certain that I was going to want to keep moving, and that turned out to be true for sure. So once I got going, it wasn't so bad. That rain jacket, the Showers Pass rain jacket, really, really played well. The extra layers that I had on, the bottom layers, and I had a merino wool sweater plus a base layer plus the rain jacket. I'll tell you, I stayed warm. I never really got cold until I stopped, and that was what kept pushing me going. As a consequence of having a wet tent, I had it packed on the outside of the of the pack, and not very well. It is a finicky system, this dowel trick, and if the pack is too close, you're going to get heel strike, and I had heel strike the whole time. And as a consequence, I changed my pedaling structure, as it were, and by doing that, I ended up creating both knee and Achilles problems, which, if you've listened to the pod much, you know that that's a pretty typical thing that happens to me. And I'm still feeling it today, which is why I'm kind of glad it's a short day, because tomorrow's a longer day. But in any event, the ride itself there were some pretty moments, I will definitely guarantee it, but it was challenging. Without having a lot of terrible terrain, it should have been faster than it was, but between, I think I go slower in the rain. I think the heel strike caused me to have problems with getting to any speed, really, to speak of, which kind of makes some sense because I wasn't pedaling as efficiently. But then, as time went on, the wind started to pick up. And then that's when things got really shitty, to be honest. I stopped for coffee a few times, and that worked out really well. It was a good way to warm up and get some caffeine in me. Got a little bit of food in some of the very, very limited small towns and stops that I had along the way. But the headwinds really kicked in. And we're not talking like, little breezes that sort of throw your momentum off. We're talking about stop you in your tracks kind of stuff. And that was it. That was filed under well, of course. So, but when all was said and done, I knew I wanted to get to Monsanto. I knew that was really the only option once I started going. Unless I went for a very short, only 10 miles down to Shelton, which didn't seem like a really good idea. My original hope was that I would be able to stop and get to a place where I could kind of assess things. But as the day went by, and when I think I made the decision when I made my final stop, which is about 4 miles from Montesano, that I was a little too cold and a little too tired, and my tent was a little too wet to pull off camping. And so I made the call to get a hotel for the night. And the good news was that Montesano had a really inexpensive and completely nice enough hotel that was available, and that just made me feel a lot better about the whole thing, because I'm not exactly rolling the dough these days. So trying to do these things for a reasonable amount of money is one of the reasons why I do it. And so that was good, and I was able to get a good dinner. I was able to obviously kind of have a reasonable night's rest, and I think that set me up for success for today. It continued to rain pretty much all night, which is just crazy, and I woke up today to this glorious sunshine that I'm currently biking in. And after riding in probably some of the most challenging conditions I've ever toured in, the only thing that I can put it up against is my very first ride when I was doing Leggett Hill in similar conditions. That really was a tough day. So to have this today, there are clouds, but it's beautiful, and there's some blue sky and some sun. It just makes life a lot easier and a lot more happy. Another added bonus is that today I'll be getting back on 101, but I'm on, I think, Washington Route 107, if I'm not mistaken. And it has a really nice wide shoulder, unlike the other roads that I was on yesterday. It never really bothered me because they were very quiet roads. And the traffic was really respectful. Shout out to the logging trucks. They were pretty good. They gave decent berth. I had a remarkably good luck with the motorized traffic yesterday. So that route, I think, is really good. It is different than I did in 2014 on my Pacific Coast route. Interestingly, I would say my worst day of the 2014 travels was that stretch as well, even though it was a slightly different route. So I think I'm a little bit cursed in this area. That was, again, headwinds, which are totally common in this part of the state. So if you are planning on riding in Washington State, that is something to bear in mind, and know that you're not probably going to make your usual Strava recorded time records because there are conditions that typically work against you. Winds are light today, and it's just a much more enjoyable time. I'm rolling right by a beautiful horse farm. A couple of horses, wondering why some rando guy on an orange clown bike is talking to himself. Bikes performed really well. I have no complaints. It was interesting. I had to adjust the saddle height right before I started recording, and I was feeling it in the knee and in the Achilles. But now, having ridden with it properly adjusted, the kinks have really worked out in both. So I think today is going to be much better, and I think I'll be much happier. Tomorrow, a little preview for tomorrow, is a longer day. And, it wouldn't have been as long if I had been able to go all the way to Bay Center today. But as I had mentioned on episode 110 of the pod, it is not available to me at this time. And that's fine. Although I did like that area. I'm looking forward to tonight in Raymond at the Pitchwood Ale House. I didn't get any beers last night. I just was not feeling it. I think I might tonight, depending on how today goes. I'm feeling very good that today seems to be. I don't have the rain jacket on. I have my layers on because it's not going to get out of the 40s, but I'll tell you what, it's a big difference between drying in the 40s and wet in the 40s, and lighter winds too, it seems. So that I feel lucky to have all of that. Fortunate, maybe is the better word. So that's it for the hardest day ever and a preview for today's ride and tomorrow's ride. Catch you later.
Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.